much. Thank you very much. Welcome to the audience with us abroad. We have a very distinguished panel here today with us, and hopefully many people around the world following this event. We are today talking about harnessing synergies between carbon markets and climate finance for achieving ambitious NDCs, focusing in particular on Senegal and West Africa. We are hosting this event jointly between the government of Senegal, represented by Madeleine here next to me, and the Climate Finance Innovators project. And before we go to the panel, I will just very briefly introduce the objectives of the event and also the context of this project. So the event today will provide a comprehensive overview of Senegals NDC, and also the role that carbon markets and climate finance play in achieving the targets set in the NDC, as well as ongoing initiatives on Article 6 readiness and piloting in Senegal and also in the region. We'll also hear about a very interesting update on regional cooperation from the West African Alliance, represented by Ousmane. And we'll also show you a little bit what the Climate Finance Innovators project, CFI, has done recently. Housekeeping, feel free to ask questions in the comments and the chat throughout the event. We'll try to prioritize those and hopefully have a lot of opportunity to discuss with you. Just very quickly, 2 slides on the CFI project to provide a little bit of context for our activities here. The project started around 3 years ago already. And at that time, there was a lot of discussion around that accessing carbon markets and climate finance has actually been a big challenge in many African countries for a long time during the Kyoto Protocol era. And since that, in response, a lot of efforts have been invested in capacity building, in infrastructure and knowledge. But now that needs to be adapted to the Paris Agreement. So we need to figure out how to do that best. And the CFI project seeks to contribute to that by providing support to the African carbon market pipeline, in particular the new generation of programmatic approaches, to scale up mitigation impacts and mobilize results-based climate finance, including through the Green Climate Fund. And the main partner countries are Ethiopia, Uganda, and Senegal, who is partnering with us today. And we are also supporting regional initiatives in East and West Africa, the West African Alliance on Carbon Markets and Climate Finance, the Eastern Africa Alliance on Carbon Markets and Climate Finance, BOID, and also the UNFCCC regional collaboration centers. And we are also making contributions in the form of advisory services to the UNFCCC negotiations. I'll keep this fairly short, but I want to point you first of all to our website and then also the studies and other knowledge products that you can find there. We have, over the years now, prepared a good number of studies that I think, as you can see in the titles here, been able to identify some of what we now call the crunch issues in Article 6 negotiations, for instance, on share of proceeds and also on CDM transition. You also see here a study moving towards next generation carbon markets that was for the first time looking at what are the practical initiatives that we already see with regards to Article 6 implementation. And of course, we were very pleased to see that West Africa is a leader here, and in particular, Senegal already has several activities started, even though we haven't even finished the rules on Article 6 yet. So that's very impressive, and I think today is a great opportunity to go into much more detail with what the success factors were there here and what are the challenges ahead. With that brief introduction, I want to come and introduce the panel here today. We have Madeleine Diouf Sarr, the head of the Climate Change Division of the Ministry of Environment in Senegal, who will provide an update on the Senegalese NDC and the role of carbon markets and climate finance. Next, we will have Ousmane Sarr, the coordinator of the West African Alliance and research director at ASER, the Rural Electrification Agency in Senegal, who will present the practical activities that the agency is doing and also the capacity building efforts that are undertaken by the Alliance. We'll have Sandra, who will share, Sandra Greiner, a lead consultant from Climate Focus, who will share further details on the efforts of CFI in Senegal and West Africa. And unfortunately, we don't have El Hadj Diane with us because he is actually leading the African group in Article 6 negotiations and couldn't attend at very short notice. But we found a very good replacement actually with our good friend Alex Dunot from AERA Group today here with us, who has also been a partner of CFI and has been deeply engaged in the activities in Senegal and the region. We also have Mubarak Mukaila, the head of the UNFCCC Regional Cooperation Center in Lomé, and also at the West African Development Bank, who is a crucial partner, again, for the country and the region. So with that, I want to welcome again everybody who has joined this conversation, and I would like now to hand over to you, Madeleine, for bringing us an overview of the Senegalese NDC. We will just probably need a few seconds to bring up the slides, but I think you can already start. And I thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephan, for inviting us to participate to this side events in order to share our experiences on the implementation of our NDC using the process and the Article 6, who is, as you say, still under negotiation. First, allow me to talk on our NDC. I think just let you know that Senegal is committed under the Paris Agreement for his NDC that was being elaborated in 2015. And also we have reviewed our NDC in order to update it. And since 2020, December 2020, we have our final NDCs who is been adopted at the national level for the presidency. You just also have a GCF also country program, so I think also it's important to mention it. And we also develop national communication, and we also working on national action plan for adaptation. Senegal NDC, just to know, is on two types of engagement, the unconditional and the conditional. And we expect to implement it by 2025 and 2030. And the NDC is totally aligned with our Senegal MSG plan. So I think this also is important to know that the NDC is linked to our development plan. The sectoral emission, I don't want to further go on it, but our NDC is a sectoral-based approach. And as I say, it covers on the mitigation part, the energy sector, the waste sector, the transportation sector, and also the LULUF sector. So, and we do have also another part to focus on adaptation. As I said before, we have two parts. We have unconditional, who is option, where we expect through national and domestic resources to achieve 7% of reduction of our level of emission. And with a conditional approach, with support from partner, we can do further like 29% of reduction of emission in Senegal. So the cost, global cost is $15 billion US, adaptation and mitigation. Regarding the implementation of our NDC, as I say, we working through different channels to look at the GCF support, to look at the implementation of a carbon tax in order to have additional financial source for the implementation of the NDC. We look at also the implementation through the Artic Assist of Kyoto, of Paris Agreement, in order to find some additional resources and to build the ambition of NDC. And we also looking to work closely with technical and financial partner, and also all non-state actors based in Senegal. regarding also the carbon finance aspect, we were been really involved in the CDM, so through the programmatic approach. We also work on the mitigation, national mitigation project, and also we have defined some standardized baseline. And as I say, we work also on how to set up a carbon tax in Senegal. It's a process, so we have through this support of BOAD that help us to move on this issue, and actually we are in the second phase. We also, as I say, starting working on how the Artic Assist will be really implemented in Senegal through a readiness process with the World Bank. And this allows us to set up what we call the standardized crediting framework, which allow us to work specifically on the electrification sector, in particular rural electrification, in order to see how it can work to implement the Artic Assist in Senegal. We also working is something that started recently with the World Bank on the PME. It is also an initiative developed by the World Bank in order to support countries, particularly developing countries, in increasing their capacity as far as we're dealing with carbon pricing instrument and also carbon market approach. We also, as far as we are in the Artic Assist implementation, we start working with the Switzerland government. So we signed a bilateral cooperation with Switzerland recently. So it was been done in July 2021. And the objective is to start working on a project that can be under Artic Assist, in particular Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement, in order also to have some IPMOs and to transfer some IPMOs for this bilateral cooperation. And we were looking to work with Click Foundation on how to implement this cooperation with the Switzerland government. Senegal is also embarked in the West African Alliance on the market, so I will maybe leave it to Mr. Ousmane Sarr, who gonna talk on it. And our expectation from this alliance is to increase the sharing of experience between the different countries who are partners of this alliance, and also to work as a group of countries having the same objective regarding the implementation of the market in our country, and how market can also allow us to increase the ambition of our mitigation part. We also going in another approaches or initiative with GGI support, and is a support from Norway through the GGI. It is also looking how we can go through sectoral approaches, policy approaches, in order to implement the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. And the objective for this initiative is also to focus on the energy sector, in particular the production of electricity. Senegal have this opportunity to move from phase 1 to phase 2 of this initiative. So now we are identifying the different policy approach we might put into implementation through this Article 6 with Norway government. I think it's all the initiative we're working on, and our expectation is looking at these different experiences we do have with different partners, with different approaches on how we can implement the Artic Assist in Senegal in order to increase our ambition. As far our NDC is ongoing, is really to set up all the architecture appropriate for the implementation of carbon market in Senegal, so give transparency in the process. Also bring all actors, in particular the private sector actor, in looking at the opportunities that the implementation of Artic Assist can provide in Senegal. We need also to strategize. We need to look at what might be the volume of mitigation we want to consider as far as we are doing with market transaction, and also to look at also what it is the part of our unconditional NDC we have also to fulfill during the first period of the NDC. So this is the element I want to share with all participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madeleine. And I think the audience could really see the leadership that Senegal has been demonstrating here globally, because I do think there's less than a handful of countries now that have gotten to the stage of already setting these bilateral agreements. And I think we could see also today that it has been building on a very robust foundation, both with all the efforts over the years in the CDM, but also then with the comprehensive and ambitious NDCs. We'll come back to that. But before we enter the discussion, I would like to invite Ousmane now to share the more practically oriented initiative now from your activities in Senegal and West Africa and ASER. Ousmane.
Thank you, Stephan. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share our experience in Senegal and in West Africa. Starting from our experience in Senegal, I work for the Senegalese Rural Electrification Agency. And as you all know, Senegal is embarked in a national strategy toward universal access and to contribute to the achievement of the SDG 7. And to be there, we have developed a national rural electrification program, because the main challenges in terms of access to electricity are in rural areas, where we have a very important gap in terms of access to electricity. For your information, in 2020, the rural electrification rate was around 53%. And we want to achieve a global rural electrification rate of 100% by 2025, and the electrification of all villages. You can see that it's a very ambitious program, and to get there, we need to mobilize a lot of funding. We decided at the government level to use conventional funding, and at the same time to use innovative financing. Part of the innovative financing is coming from carbon markets, and also we decided to use also the opportunity given by the climate financing through the GCF. And for that, we have already developed a big program of activity, the CDM program of activity dealing with electrification of communities. And this program has been subject to an emission reduction purchase agreement with the World Bank, and we expect to use these revenues to scale up access to electricity by facilitating the connection of rural customers where we have identified very weak potential in terms of financing. And in addition to that, recently, after realizing that the gap is still very important, we engage the process of mobilizing additional funding from the GCF. And recently, last year, we got funding of $80 million funding from the GCF in partnership with the West African Development Bank. I must say here that it was not a very easy task. It was very challenging. If we consider the complexity of the rules from the GCF, but we managed with the support of the West African Development Bank, the BOAD, with climate finance innovators, technical assistance, we managed to overcome these challenges and mobilize this funding for ASER. And now we have started the process of the implementation, and maybe Mubarak will talk more about that. They have already, the BOAD have already signed the AMA, and we are now on the way to finalize all the subsidiary agreement that can allow us to start the concrete implementation of this project. So in terms of feedback, maybe we can come back in detail regarding some specific challenges we met in terms of accounting toward the NDC and in terms of linkages between the carbon markets and the climate financing. And I think we have some more issues to raise during our discussion because we face some challenges that we are now trying to overcome. And in the other hand, I can just give some information about the West African Alliance on Carbon Markets and Climate Finance. This alliance has been created in 2017 with the aim to support West African countries to take advantage of the carbon markets opportunities and also to assist them in mobilizing climate finance, because we all have noticed that access to finance is a key challenge in our sub-region. And what we have done since the creation of this alliance, just to tell you that all 16 countries of West Africa have affiliated to this alliance, and we managed to have every country on board. And this fast growing of this alliance was very challenging, and we had to manage this and to see how best we can have everybody in the same page when it comes to use the opportunities of carbon markets and climate financing. But in terms of support, after being very involved in the negotiation process, we decided to be more active at a ground level and to assist countries to better prepare themselves to engage on carbon markets and climate financing. To be able to do that, we have undertaken a scoping study for the whole region. All the 16 countries have been subject to a kind of scoping study where we had the opportunity to identify the gap in terms of readiness for Article 6 implementation. And after this scoping study, now we are at a stage of implementing a readiness support program for all these countries by using what we call a kind of blueprint that can be applicable for all countries. To tell you about the main gaps that we have identified in our sub-region, in the countries, just to mention the issue of some policy measures that need to be taken into consideration when it comes to get in Article 6. We have identified also some governance issues. Madeleine has already mentioned some of them that Senegal is now trying to tackle. We have some infrastructure issues, and we have also the monitoring and verification issue relative to the creation of a national registry to track all activities that have now being implemented at a country level. So we are trying to support these countries in order to overcome these barriers, because in our sub-region we have two types of, or I can say three types of countries. We have some countries that are front runners, like Ghana, like Senegal, who have already engaged a process of being operational to use markets toward their NDCs. And we have some early movers, some countries who are just starting, and we have countries that are in the middle. So we need to have everybody on board and leave no one behind. So it's very challenging, but we are trying to promote some peer-to-peer learning, some South-South exchange, and so that at the end of the day we can have everybody on the same page when it comes to be ready for Article 6. I can stop now and to give you the opportunity to come back with more precise questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ousmane. I think that was also very impressive. I think we can really see that the activities that ASER is undertaking practically really contribute to sustainable development strongly of rural communities, and also that the Alliance is really doing some very innovative and important capacity building efforts, which is also something that is being discussed in the negotiation rooms a lot. But as you said, let's come back to that later. And for now, Sandra, can I invite you to share more of the activities that you have undertaken in Senegal, and also some of the, the key issues that you see now in light of where we stand right now in this process of moving towards Paris Agreement implementation.
Thank you, Stephan, and I'm very happy to come in after the good explanations from Madeleine and Ousmane, which gives the perfect framework for me now to explain a bit about the role of the Climate Finance Innovators project in all of this. And Stephan, of course, already introduced generally the project. I would like to focus a bit more on the activities that have taken place in Senegal. And particularly, well, the Climate Finance Innovators project, of course, seeks to harness the synergies of carbon markets and climate finance, and does so in 3 countries, Senegal being one. And with that, there are basically 2 objectives to our engagement in Senegal. One, very concretely, to bring a real benefit to Senegal and to make sure that climate finance is coming to the region. The second objective is also a learning objective, to see what can we draw on, or what kind of lessons learned can we gather from really engaging in carbon markets and climate finance. What is the relationship, including for NDC implementation and issues such as accounting. And of course, the ASER project is really a perfect case for this, because it is involved very broadly. So it's there's already a program of activities registered under the CDM. And then, as Madeleine explained, it also supported the creation of the standardized crediting framework in the World Bank, with the support of the World Bank. And we also now have the example of funding from the Green Climate Fund to support rural electrification. So what did we do as Climate Finance Innovators project? Basically, we supported the application of ASER to the Green Climate Fund, to the GCF. And in that played, I would say, 3 types of roles. The first one being one of facilitation, which I think was quite important, especially at a time when it's not so clear yet what will be the success, and how the eligibility criteria are, to invest in the scoping and to see Now, how could we frame the project? How could we support it so that it might, at the end of the day, be successful? So the Climate Finance Innovators project was engaged up front, including in discussing with various partners and helping basically to bring partners together, which were already talking, but then the project could help to convene meetings together and to also infuse a bit of energy and bring technical capacity to it, to the process. That's one. The second role we played was technical in supporting directly the project documentation and the application for the project, which, as Ousmane already pointed out, was quite challenging at times because we had to react sometimes on quite short notice, and we had to, well, together with BOAD and ASER, respond to, of course, many comments that were coming. So it was very useful, I think, to have this possibility as a group to come together and pool everybody's capacity to be able to send in a successful application. So for the Climate Finance Innovators project, our milestone has actually been achieved, which was to submit a climate finance application to the GCF. And not only that, we are very happy that it has been approved by the GCF board last year. And so the question, of course, now also for us is how can we continue supporting? Maybe Alex, who has been leading the efforts on the hands-on preparation, can also talk a bit about the kind of technical support we are still providing here and there. But mostly, I think that was the achievement so far. So the focus that the project currently has is thinking a bit further. So how does actually now this climate finance application, and which will hopefully come through soon through the GCF, how does that also integrate with other processes? So, for instance, how does that link to the POA that is also already registered by ASER? And there are efforts to see how this could be integrated even more. How does it link generally to MRV and accounting towards the Senegalese NDC? So these are certainly questions we are very happy to also explore further, and so happy to exchange further with our Senegalese partners how to continue the support. And that's it from my side.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for giving us this overview. And I'm sure there's a couple of issues we can pick up on again, especially the forward-looking ones. But Mubarak, can you explain to us, what has been the role of BOAD in this process, and also, again, looking forward, how do you see the role of the bank here in helping the region to access carbon resources from carbon markets and climate finance? What are your approaches? What is your thinking on that?
Thank you very much. I think Ousmane has already said it. And I think this project was built in a very innovative way. And I think it becomes a case study in terms of bringing together multi-stakeholders in terms of building a project. As you may see, you have a national entity that works together with international and national consultancy agencies, together with a regional bank, that come together with an idea, structuring an innovative form of bringing together financing. And when we talk about this project, we tend to think about the innovative technology that is used. But then you have to look at it in terms of the innovative way that all these institutions are brought together to structure this financing. And that's one of the new idea, the new aim of the new strategic plan of the West African Development Bank, that has a new strategic plan that goes from 2021 to 2025. It is named Joliba Plan, that aims to bring this innovative approach in structuring financing to support projects and all programs in the West African region. And this new strategic plan brings new ideas, and the bank has totally reorganized in sectors to make sure that we have a specific needs-based approach to projects. So we build in terms of sectors, and then these sectors will look at targeted resources to come and finance projects. In the case of Senegal, for example, the interlinkages with the resources that BOAD, the West African Development Bank, has financed to these projects, and the resources brought by the GCF makes the project more accessible to populations. And this is very important when you do a development project in our region. And also, Ousmane mentioned in his presentation as well the role that the carbon credits had in these projects. And it's one of the points as well that made these projects very accessible to the populations, the way they merge all these financial instruments to make these projects viable to populations. And that's one of the key aspects that BOAD aims to do as well in the coming years, and also supporting the reduction of emissions in projects. And we believe that this is an area that will develop more. We know that the negotiations right now are very difficult and very well, but we have hope that it's going in the right. It will go in the right directions, because it's very important for the sustainability of financing of projects in our region. And the way the credit carbons are used here is one of the reasons why the West African Development Bank as well aims to support this the regional carbon market as well, to make sure that we have a very strong institutional framework to support this financial instruments. And we believe that the work that we're doing with through the West African Alliance, and the work that we're doing with the ECOWAS Commission as well, to build a subnational carbon markets platform as well, is very important. And we have had many regions as well that come to us, the Central African region, the East African region as well, that's very interested in building strong regional instruments for the carbon market. So we have a strong hope in the upcoming negotiation, the final decisions that will come through these negotiations, that we will have a very strong framework to support this market. And just to highlight what BOAD aims to do for within the next 4 years, BOAD aims to reorient 25% of its financing to climate finance and reduce at least 18 million credit emission reductions. So it's very important, and BOAD strongly believes into the future of carbon markets, and we believe that it will be an instrument that will support the sustainability of projects, and then also help to bring those projects to the end users as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mubarak. Also very impressive to hear how the bank is really defining its strategy and how climate finance is playing an important role. Alex, I'd like to turn to you now. And since you have been so deeply involved, as Sandra has already indicated, in not only the GCF proposal, but actually also, the carbon market activities in Senegal and West Africa, I was wondering whether you can explain our audience a little bit more, what is now the relationship between the CDM program that ASER is doing, and then also the part that the GCF is funding, because I think this is one of the innovative aspects also of the approach taken here by ASER, that you really try to draw on different sources of funding bring together their respective strengths. So maybe you can share with us, how that is coming together, but then also maybe share with us, some of the challenges that you observed in the process more practically, and if you want, of course, also some ideas on how to address those.
Thanks, Stephan. So I was prepared to be questioned on the broader role of private sector in carbon markets, but the narrowed inquiry is more practical. And as we were probably actors and advisors to this successful GCF funding request for the rural electrification program, as well as also closely involved in the technical assistance to the previously registered CDM program of activities of the Rural Electrification Agency that includes these solar mini-grids component that these newly approved GCF project is all about. We have probably contributed to this fine combination of a private sector de-risking and private sector facilitating tool, because over half of the geographical regions that the rural electrification program targets are actually granted to private concessionaires that, although not risk adverse, are definitely not fools neither, and only eventually mobilize resources and invest in these concessions, because the concessional terms and the co-financing from the GCF project and the state of Senegal makes their investments wise and rewarding in these very remote, very small-scaled villages to be electrified, where the traditional unsustainable diesel generators are not desired anymore, but the grid extension is not possible or practically envisaged either. So the interplay between this CDM program of activities and this GCF contribution to the program has built on the World Bank financial assistance through carbon credits that had fueled an innovative coupon schemes to encourage new connections from private sector concessionaires that would get it pre-financed by the carbon credits facility against future refunding from carbon credits trading, and the onward-looking activities that will link and keep interplaying the carbon markets and climate finance involve obviously the preparation for the monitoring of the program's emission reductions, accounting for the electrified villages emission reductions as part or under the CDM registered framework, yet allocating these emission reductions and environmental attributes specifically to the GCF finance scope of the national electrification program, when the World Bank has a commitment to the original villages and original component activities of the program, while at the same time looking beyond the mitigation outcomes, because although the GCF did not eventually register it or approved it as a cross-cutting program, the rural electrification program obviously has strong adaptation co-benefits, which we are also busy properly recognizing and quantifying in order to link it also to the NDC strategy and reflect it fairly besides the project's emission reductions.
Thank you, Alex. And since you have been now talking, and also Mubarak has been talking about, to some extent, the activities that ASER is undertaking and leading practically, Ousmane, you already hinted at, some issues that you have observed, because we all, I think, agree that there is a lot of synergy to be derived from both carbon markets and climate finance for the practical orientation. But you've also encountered some practical challenges when it comes to, navigating all the participation requirements of these climate financing institutions. So can you share, some more insights, and also maybe, some constructive ideas that you have now generated through your experience in participating in these mechanisms?
Yes, I think one of the main issues we face is the issue of accounting the emission reduction and their potential use in our NDC or not. Because the debate is still ongoing with the GCF, how emission reduction generated by this funding can be used or not with, on our NDC, or should they be cancelled. So in order to avoid double counting between the emission reduction coming from investment financed by GCF and the other investment where we have already signed an emission reduction purchase agreement with the World Bank, we need to put in place a very robust accounting system, a monitoring system. And to be able to do that, what we are planning to do is to consider the investment made by the GCF as a separate CPA. CPA.
For the audience, because we are all in our carbon world, sometimes a bit too immersed, but of course, I think
exactly.
We heard that there's 100,000 participants. So.
Yeah, it's an activity project that is under the umbrella of the program of activity. Yeah. So if you have the possibility to separate all emission reduction coming from the GCF financing, we can have a clear accounting for this emission reduction generated by this project. And the other challenge also that we face is the transition issue from our current program of activity to Article 6. That's why, as Madeleine said, we embark in piloting what we call the standardized crediting framework with always the support of the World Bank. We managed to have a host country process starting from the project preparation, the development, the monitoring, and the issuance of the emission reduction units. But the challenge ahead is how to continue the process until the ITMO transaction in terms of regulations, in terms of governance, and in terms of eligibility criteria development for all activities, and also how to extend the scope of the SCF to other sectors. That is the main challenge we face in Senegal. And also another challenge was this blinding of financing sources that we managed to do in the rural electrification program, because it's a program co-financed by the government, by BOAD, by the private sector, and also by the Green Climate Fund. So it was also a challenge to have all these stakeholders on board and try to see how best we can use their co-financing in the overall configuration of the financial structure of this program.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think now many of those challenges that you mentioned on accounting also really relate to how the government of Senegal is defining and managing the participation requirements to some extent. So Madeleine, if I can turn to you again, picking up on these issues, can you share with the audience, what's the view and approach now of the Ministry of Environment? I mean, how do you plan to build on the institutions that you have created for the CDM? I mean, how do you see their relevance for Article 6? And what do you think needs to do now, for the new participation requirements that Ousmane has indicated, that it is now a big challenge to be able to navigate, the robust accounting requirements. And if you can just quickly shed maybe some light on that for the audience, also with regards to whether Senegal, is ready and willing to provide all of these necessary procedures, in particular the corresponding adjustments that everybody is talking about. So 2 questions really, how do you prepare for these new requirements building on CDM, and then what is the position of the government on making sure that all of those transactions are accounted for properly and adjusted as needed?
Thank you, Stephan, for your relevant question. I think it's really, as you say, it's a challenge activities we have to undertake on this on the implementation of Article 6. And regarding the experience we have for this different initiative, we can know that there is a need for people to understand really what it is, the implementation of Article 6, and what it is setting up the registry process where maybe all data have to be provided, and also to look at the accuracy of the data available. And there's one aspect also which is really important, is the implementation. So we are going in a result-based approach, so being sure that we have to have all the environment appropriate in order to satisfy the ITMOs we want to transfer. So this means that there is a lot of capacity to build at the sectorial level. I think this is important. To build also at the where activities are supposed to be developed for the implementation of Article 6, and also to open it regarding the MRV process to not only on to the state actor, but also to non-state actor, and it's where I see the implication of Mayor. I see the implication involvement of private sector in order really to have a clear vision on the data, but also to be sure that we're not going to miss the issue of, as you say, the corresponding adjustment. So I think this is all the aspects we have to think about.
Good, and that means that in the context of the Senegalese NDC and achieving the targets, if there is an international transfer of a carbon credit, these so-called ITMOs, then the government of Senegal will provide these corresponding adjustments so that the project developers like ASER and others have the certainty that they follow all the correct requirements. That is correct?
Yes, I think this is clear. It's just, as I say, it's a well-organized approach we have to set up. Ensure that all the capacity is there for actor, in particular state actor and non-state actor, involved in the implementation directly by the project, and have a clear architecture, and the architecture we're talking about a registry, but have a clear instrument that allow us to check all this process.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that is a complex undertaking, but as you have already started the journey and have demonstrated that you can navigate these requirements, I'm sure Senegal will be a leader in the region very soon, also in the future. Sandra, I'd like to come back to you because Madeleine was picking up on a very interesting aspect of the MIV, and of course there are these two levels that on one hand we have what we know very well, the MIV at the activity level, the level of the project, for instance at ASER, but then now also we have the new challenge that we need to track progress towards the NDC targets. So we have also MIV monitoring, reporting and verification at the level of the country for the NDC. And can you explain a little bit, how do these two levels interact now from a technical perspective, and what are your ideas on how one can make sure that there is no mismatch between these two levels?
That's a very difficult question. And, well, we know both MRV processes fairly well. So we know from the CDM how the project level MRV works, right? Bottom up, where you monitor exactly what are your project emissions, what is the baseline of your project. And there are many methodologies that have been developed under the CDM that project developers are used to, and they have been refined. So there's a whole basis of knowledge there. And on the other hand, of course, there is the top-down national level monitoring of emissions based on the inventories. And now the new challenge is to see how does that relate to the NDC and the NDC commitments. And countries have to build that up. So that's on the one hand, of course, even from the Kyoto Protocol, it is clear how countries need to do their inventories, and there are certain top-down methodologies. So the new part will be how do we track accomplishment of our NDC, and of course also how do we do then corresponding adjustments, which is yet again another layer. The corresponding adjustment, I think, in theory become clearer and clearer, but certainly the rules are not yet in place. So they are being negotiated as we speak, and hopefully at the end of Glasgow there will be further clarity, both in the Article 6 room, the Article 6 negotiations, as well as under the transparency negotiations, to allow countries to really move forward and have a clear guidance on what needs to be done. But then, of course, as you mentioned, there is now the issue of how do the CDM methodologies and the top-down methodologies, how do they even correspond? Do they correspond neatly with each other? And we already see that there are some tricky aspects to that. In theory, it should correspond. Doesn't matter if you measure bottom up or top down, but then when you actually do that, you will see that some approaches don't necessarily match. So you might have the emission reductions that you monitor on the ground level. They might not actually show up in the country's inventory simply because the country has a different approach of monitoring the inventory. So for instance, if a country doesn't have good granular data but uses certain default factors, this may not change, right? So you might have a project activity that reduces a lot, but since you continue using your default method, the emission reductions that you are producing might not show up in your books, in your national books, which would be an issue if you want to sell your emission reductions abroad, but then you are not actually reducing inventory emissions, you're not reaching your NDC, right? So this could be a problem. Something else that we've also encountered, especially in relation to, well, this is not perhaps relevant for the ASER case, but in relation to non-renewable biomass, so any projects that displace, for instance, the use of charcoal and biomass. We have under the CDM methodologies that capture that, and of course there are a lot of emission reductions that can be achieved through that. But your inventory emissions may not pick that up because biomass is considered by default renewable, although it isn't always, right? So these are certainly issues that countries will have to think about very carefully, including when they are authorizing the transfer of emission reductions abroad as ITMOs.
Yeah, a lot of food for thought here. Ousmane, do you want to react directly?
I just wanted to raise also the issue relative to the conditional and the unconditional part of the NDC and how to account this when it comes to do corresponding adjustment. Still things are not clear on how to do corresponding adjustment on activities that have been implemented in a conditional part of your NDC. So it is yet to, we have to decide on how to deal with these cases.
Yeah, it is clearly an unresolved question, and you are giving me now the opportunity to once again promote our studies that we did in the CFI project, which includes the most recent one actually as of May this year, on exactly this question on the conditionality of NDC targets and the role of carbon markets. So just as a quick plug. But can we quickly check in? Do we have questions from the audience virtually? If not, then I would say let's continue with reactions. I mean, does anyone want to react directly to one of those points made? Otherwise, I'd also have a few more questions, but maybe someone wants to also react to the points made. Then, until we reflect on that, Mubarak, can I come back to you? And you mentioned a very interesting concept of needs-based finance that you described earlier as a very important part of your strategic plan. And I really much appreciate that you kept it brief and concise earlier, but I think it's really something new. So I think it's worth that you explain a bit more in detail. First of all, what does it mean? And then also, how can carbon markets, maybe also other forms of climate finance, can help you mobilize and deliver this kind of finance?
Thank you very much. I think it was something very interesting that we did early this year, and together with the West African Alliance as well, the synergy of activities that we had under the need-based finance projects, and it's actually allowed us to see to have a global picture and mapping of the resources needed for the implementation of the NDCs in the West African region. And I think in collaboration with the ECOWAS, the West African Alliance I've mentioned already, and the countries are really very actively participating into this initiative. And then it also allowed to exchange experiences and then build upon what other countries are doing. And this study, I think we have the final reports that has been submitted to countries and is being approved. And then we have a clear picture in terms of mitigation. What are the needs in terms of mitigations? Where do we find sources to invest and for the implementation of this aspect? And also in terms of adaptation. And at the sub-regional level, it also brings out what are the different instruments that need to be put in place for the implementation of these NDCs. And it's important to see that in all these aspects, countries are really hoping that the emission reductions can be used as a financial instrument in the implementation of the NDCs. And also, there are many areas that we've seen as sources of resources to implement the NDCs. We've looked into sustainability bonds, green bonds. We've looked into many different channels from where we could possibly find sources to finance the implementation of the NDCs. So it was a very good work that we did at the regional level, and it clearly shows in terms of capacity as well, the needs, capacity building, technology transfer. So it's a general mapping of what the countries in the sub-region have proposed as NDCs, and what are the needs and what are the requirements in terms of, in order to be able to implement the NDCs. So it's, I think after this, especially because by 2020 was the year where we were supposed to scale up the NDCs, raise our ambitions, and it was unfortunately the year where nobody could meet. So countries had opportunities to even work better on their NDCs, integrate other sectors like health sector, education. We've seen all the shortages that we have with those sectors, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, and then it also allows to readjust those sectors to the ambitions. So we will see that when you look at the need-based finance studies that is done in the region, and with the updating, we see a shift in the country's ambition to reduce emissions from now to 2030. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I really think it's worth underlining, what you just said, that despite the pandemic, people didn't, divert their attention from climate change, but were actually really, focusing on it even more. I think, this is not something we would have expected some few years ago, and I think it really shows the relevance of the topic, and that the awareness and the understanding has really sunk in, and at least for me, that gives me good hope that, we will continue to be on that journey towards raising ambition. Before we do a very final quick lightning round of, what is your hope for a successful COP26 outcome in just 1 or 2 minutes before we close, Alex, I wanted to pick up very briefly on something that you said earlier in your first intervention on the role of the private sector, because I know that you are very much engaged, with a lot of participants in the carbon market, and of course we have had some difficult years in the carbon market in the mid-2010s, and I wanted you, to share a little bit your observations, your experience, and how do you observe the interest of private sector companies to come back to the carbon market now that we are approaching or have entered actually the NDC implementation period, and hopefully see a continuation of increasing ambition in NDCs, and also clarity on how we can participate in carbon markets through Article 6.
Well, I think there are high expectations from private sector that have always been market makers on both the supply of emission reductions through a variety of privately funded renewable energy projects like IPPs, even through these public-private partnerships or build, operate and transfer models, but also at the national level, that when private sector contributed to rural electrification projects like we mentioned, as well as on the demand side for overwhelming and increasingly significant demand for voluntary offsetting from individuals to large corporates, industries, aggregation of demand for carbon footprinting and neutral achievement. But the key concern is, and has always been, definitely the long-term visibility, which has proven a challenge and has deterred quite a lot of private investment and involvement in carbon markets when the uncertainties got so intense and delayed till now and until another few days with regards to the transition for previously registered projects that had been planning on a 10 years, 20 years total crediting period for their actual environmental achievements to be recognized and rewarded with the sources of funding they would deserve. So that is why, well, the private sector interest and voices should be carefully considered in this consolidation and globally binding negotiation process when there has been voluntary initiatives and private efforts already put on the table that should not be undermined with the new mechanism to hopefully be delivered by the end of the week. I think
it's very encouraging to hear that we have this renewed interest. And so maybe just to close with maybe a 20-second, very quick wish of what you hope that COP26 will deliver. Alex, since you just had the floor, maybe you can begin and then we work our way through and I will close the event.
Well, as I just said, the private sector wishes that we represent would be summarized with visibility and clear long-term direction on what can they expect from carbon markets and how safely and wisely they can keep investing in environmentally sound activities.
Excellent. Thank you, Mubarak.
Well, I think for the sake of adaptation, for example, I think like we've during the discussions I've seen many times the adaptation benefit mechanism, for example, I think it's a very important to have it for the sake of Africa, at least to have it in the negotiation, and it's well written. And I think it's a very important that you have that
very
into the discussion.
Very interesting. Sandra.
Very clear Article 6 agreement with also good solution for CDM transition and share of proceeds and adaptation finance.
Excellent. Ousmane.
Same as me. Article 6 agreement, more contribution for adaptation and clear signal to the private sector for better involvement because of CDM transitioning.
And Madeleine?
Yeah, same for us. I think at the national level, we're looking for having really something coming out from the Article 6 and looking for having some revenue for the adaptation and also some opportunities to increase the ambition for implementation of Article 6.
Very, very important. Yeah, I think this was really interesting also that you all emphasized the role of adaptation also, which is of course very, very important. So I'm glad we could have this event. I want to thank you all very much for your participation. Also want to thank the organizers here for hosting us today very well. And with that, we want to close the event and look forward to continued ways and opportunities to work together. Thank you very much.